Alright guys, so let's talk about the BRICS. It's January 2024 and the BRICS expansion is now official. The bloc has now expanded beyond the original 5 members. Saudi Arabia, Iran, UAE, Egypt and Ethiopia, they have all joined the bloc. Now Argentina of course has declined. Milei has steered the country towards the west, but even without the Argentinians, BRICS is now stronger than ever before. And as we move deeper into the year, don't be surprised if more countries join their ranks. The Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov mentioned how 30 more nations are interested in joining BRICS. We are witnessing the rise of an economic bloc that will pose a big challenge to the West. The G7 will be facing a very big rival, a rival that exceeds them in many important metrics, especially when it comes to the global economy. Now, just based on GDP alone, the BRICS has long exceeded the G7 in purchasing power parity. They overtook the West back in 2020, and this gap has grown well into 2023. BRICS accounts for 2% more of the global economic growth versus G7. These are just the original members, including China, India, and Russia. With the BRICS expanding, the global south will pull ahead even further. The game changers here are, of course, the Middle East heavyweights, Iran, the UAE, and Saudi Arabia. The addition of these members gives BRICS a geopolitical foothold in the Middle East. A huge percentage of global energy production is now controlled by the bloc. And this shouldn't come as a surprise. The signs were obvious. The moment we saw Putin heading to Riyadh and Abu Dhabi and the magnificent reception he received, it was all but confirmed. Just look at this handshake between MBS and Putin. It's a handshake that tells us one thing: the world order will never be the same again, and they are driving this change together. Going forward into 2024, we'll see the bloc coordinate closer. They will work closely together in bilateral trade, they'll continue to undermine the dollar and build their economies further. And here's the crazy thing: it was the US government that guaranteed this BRICS expansion. Now, thanks to the chaos in the Middle East, the Arab nations have now sided with the BRICS bloc. America made a vital error that can't be taken back. Because of the Gaza war, the Saudi-Israel normalization deal is now in ruins. In a recent poll, 96% of Saudis believe that Arab countries should cut all ties with Israel. And because the US keeps supporting Israel and keeps vetoing all the ceasefire resolutions, the Middle East is now outraged. And it's not just economics that's driving this decision, but politics also plays a very big factor as well. In 2024, it's important to note that Russia now assumes the chairmanship of the bloc for 1 year, and this is a big deal. Russia will be pushing for multipolar world order, and the motto for BRICS this year will be strengthening multilateralism for equitable global development and security. Not only will economic growth be important, there will be an added focus on securing this growth. And to accomplish this, Moscow will be helping to facilitate the integration of all 10 member countries. And if Putin is successful, the G7 will be in big trouble. So why is BRICS expanding? Why are the Saudis and the Iranians so interested in joining the bloc? It's because they want to align with the future of the world economy. While the West is still a big customer, the economic growth of the BRICS nations is exploding. The BRICS today accounts for 45% of the world's global population. Countries like China and India, they have a middle class that will outpace any country in the West, even the United States. If we look at the other metrics of BRICS, it's a no-brainer why 30 more countries are seeking membership. Collectively, BRICS also accounts for 43% of global oil production and 25% of exports to the world. By joining BRICS, you now have access to both the supply side of global trade and the demand side as well. This is a potent mix that helps countries secure their supply chains. For example, if you're Saudi Arabia, joining BRICS gives you a couple of advantages. Firstly, you'll be able to sanction-proof yourself from America. And let's recall what happened. The G7 sanctioned Russia back in 2022. They imposed price caps and the EU outright banned the import of Russian oil. Those ultimately failed, but they caused revenue to fall in the initial stages. Now, this is unthinkable for energy producers in the Middle East. 40% of Saudi GDP and 75% of fiscal revenue comes from their petroleum sector. So any sanctions or blockade could collapse their economy, at least initially. With BRICS, you'll be able to secure your oil exports without the fear of sanctions. Even if the West imposes price caps, your economy won't fall. You can divert flows to a region in the world that's growing fast. Secondly, compared to the West, countries in the bloc will be adding an army of consumers. In fact, the magnitude is so skewed towards BRICS, it's no wonder many countries are really seeking membership. Globally, over 100 million consumers will be added this year, the majority of which will be coming from Asia and Africa. India and China alone accounts for 55% of consumer growth, 31 million coming from China and 33 million coming from India. Comparatively, the US and Europe represents less than 5% of this growth. A growing consumer class means an increased demand for imports, and the country also consumes more energy such as oil and gas, especially when they are manufacturing hub like China and India. By expanding membership with emerging markets, the bloc will be able to diversify trade away from the West. And there's a good reason why many countries in the world today they are still afraid of G7 sanctions. It's the fear of losing the US consumer and getting cut away from the Western financial system. Because of the US dollar, the SWIFT system, and the banks, the entire architecture is still predominantly American. However, Russia is now moving to reset the economic order. With the chairmanship under Moscow this year, we can expect big shifts starting in 2024. According to a Russian think tank, no one can guarantee that Western sanctions will not be imposed against other countries. Whether that be sanctions on commodity exports or targeting central bank reserves, the BRICS will move to secure against punishments from the West. And over the past few months, we have seen the G7 move closer and closer towards confiscating Russia's assets. This isn't just crossing the financial Rubicon, it's an announcement to the world that your dollar and your euro assets are always at risk of seizure. Washington is now drawing up plans to confiscate $300 billion of Russia's frozen reserves. And if you buy any US treasuries or euro bonds, there's now extreme counterparty risk involved. Not only is there an inflation crisis, but the money could also get taken away against your will. In response, we can expect Russia to push for more de-dollarization amongst the BRICS nations. The simplest ways to wean yourself off from this risk is to increase bilateral trade. And with countries like Saudi Arabia and the bloc, oil could start being priced away from dollars very soon. BRICS countries could start trading in their local currencies with each other, bypassing the greenback completely. Russia and China, for example, they have written the perfect playbook for the rest of the BRICS nations to follow. Because of Western sanctions, both countries have been increasing bilateral trade like never before. Since 2021, Russia China trade has exploded, hitting well over $200 billion last year. China imports lots of energy from Moscow, while Russia buys almost everything else from Beijing, including computers and cars. And here's the important part, which currency do you think is being used here? Russia's Prime Minister has revealed the shocking answer. More than 90% of trade between the two countries was done in either the Chinese yuan or the Russian ruble. In other words, de-dollarization is almost complete. There isn't a need to use the world reserve currency to settle economic trade between them. And with 10 members today, the BRICS nations have enormous leverage in the global economy. You have Russia and the Middle East providing energy exports, China and India providing finished goods, and this allows the bloc to trade amongst themselves and settle the majority of trade in local currencies. In just 2 years, China increased their yuan based trade from 15% to 27%. That's almost double the amount of exports and imports priced away from the US dollar. The Western financial markets might be impossible to challenge, but one area of weakness is global trade. Because BRICS exports are real goods and real commodities the world all needs, they could start demanding to settle trade balances outside of the dollar. And this won't look good for the dollar's market share in the years and decades to come. From Bloomberg, IMF data shows the dollar shares in central bank reserves declined. It has dropped to 59.2% in Q3, down by 0.2% in Q2 last year. This might seem insignificant, but it foreshadows what could happen down the road. The more countries conduct trade in their own currencies, the lesser the need to hold dollars in reserves. This also means rolling less money into US investments like treasury bonds. Over the past 2 years, we have seen the acceleration of US sanctions. Not only were assets frozen, but vital commodities and exports were also restricted. And this is harmful to emerging economies looking to grow their economies. As we move towards a renewable future and the rise of AI, artificial intelligence, The BRICS nations need to secure valuable resources for themselves, and one clear battleground will be technology and microchips. To protect their interests, the US has unleashed a ton of sanctions on China. This restricts vital chip-making technology to China, and the restrictions are escalating. ASML, a Dutch chip maker, recently cancelled shipments of their machines to China. These were deals already agreed upon, but President Biden did a crackdown and the company caved to their demands. That's what happens when you have a unipolar world, a world where technology is controlled by only one economic bloc. However, China is starting to fight back on these tax sanctions. Huawei is forecasting nearly $100 billion in sales. They developed the 4 nanometer microchip as well. And this flies in the face of US sanctions and shows that a new technology hub is building in Asia. Very soon, we'll see a future with both blocs having equal access to technology. And if there's an economic decoupling, BRICS can still survive and thrive. The US and Taiwan will be supplying the galactic north, while China will be supplying the global south with chips. In retaliation to the tax sanctions, China has also unleashed their own trade war on the G7. They are making it harder for the West to develop renewable technologies and electronics as well. China turns up heat on trade with rare earths tech curbs. Beijing has halted exports of rare earth metals and technologies to the West. Commodities are being weaponized like never before, right? China is now flexing their muscles in an industry they dominate, which is rare earths refining. 100% of rare earth supply comes from China. 85% of light rare earths also comes from Beijing. And this is a clear domination of vital commodities needed to drive tomorrow's economy. Rare earths are needed to build EVs, wind turbines, and even military armaments like missiles and stealth fighters. Whoever controls their supply controls the future of tech advancement. And here's where things get really interesting. If we visualize the global reserves of rare earths, it's clear who the big winners are. China comes in at 44 million tons, Brazil is second with 21 million, and Russia is third with 12 million tons. Collectively, the BRICS controls over 70% of global rare earth reserves. That's a ton of resources that can influence global trade. They are a commodity giant that goes beyond just oil and gas. BRICS is an economic bloc. They will keep trading with the rest of the world, including the West. But if sanctions were ever imposed on a member country, they would have the support of the other member nations. Just like how China and India kept buying Russian oil, vital commodities and trade will keep flowing. The risk of a full economic collapse is now prevented. So, how does this affect us? Well, the rise of BRICS means a decoupling of global trade and global currencies as well. When more bilateral trade starts moving away from the dollar, naturally, there'll be a lesser need to hold investments like US Treasury bonds. And this shouldn't be shocking to anyone. It's basic cause and effect. Even a monkey can see this coming from a mile away. Thanks to sanctions and de-dollarization, money has been flowing into gold. Central banks in 2022 and 23, they have been stacking lots of gold. The volumes have doubled compared to the last 10 years. While local currencies like the yuan will be used for trade settlement, that doesn't really mean they'll be used as reserves, right? They're still fiat currencies that lose value over time. So we can expect gold buying to continue and even increase with the rise of BRICS. Conversely, we'll see a more fragile US Treasury market that will become more domestic driven. According to the Peterson Foundation, foreign holdings of US debt peaked at 49% in 2011, but it has dropped steadily down to 30% by the start of 2023. A big part comes from the rising national debt, of course. However, that's only one part of the equation. A rising BRICS bloc will cause foreign demand for US bonds to collapse even further, especially from the global south. The nominal amount might increase, but percentage wise, it will drop. The backholders will be local US investors and their G7 allies. So it's a smart move to position yourself to where the money is going to flow to. It's very likely more money will shift into gold as a reserve asset. As for Argentina's decision to reject BRICS for the dollar, I'll end this with Putin's comment. That is Argentina's prerogative, but this is definitely a significant loss of sovereignty. So don't be surprised if one day Argentina returns to the fold. They might just come knocking a request for their invitation back. But let me know what you think, guys. What would the BRICS expansion mean? Can the bloc challenge the G7 in the global economy? Let me know in the comments below. Stay safe, be sure to smash the like button and subscribe as we navigate through these crazy times.